Welcome to High Performance Hockey Podcast. Today we're joined by the head strength and conditioning coach for the All Blacks Sevens, Dr. Travis McMaster. Travis is currently the director of strength and conditioning for the All Blacks Sevens, a post that he's had since 2021. Prior to his time with the Sevens, Travis served as a sports science and performance coach for the Vegas Golden Knights. In 2018 through 2020, Travis was back with the All Blacks Sevens and Ferns, serving as the head strength and conditioning coach. Really interesting conversation that we have with Travis. We talked about his education, his background in sports science, rugby, the sport of rugby, the All Blacks, building a culture, specifically the principles from Legacy, James Kerr's book, Sweeping the Sheds, Going for the Gap, Embracing Expectations, etc. And we talked about the high performance model in this sport of rugby. It's a fantastic conversation. Welcome to the podcast. Travis, welcome to the podcast. Thanks so much for joining us.
Appreciate it, Anthony. Pleasure to be here, man. Good to be connecting around the world again. I'm over here sitting in New Zealand in a chair at 7 a.m. right now, New Zealand time.
A world away. New Zealand. So I've got to ask, you are working in professional rugby, the All Blacks, which is a storied franchise. Your current appointment with the All Blacks, you are the director of strength and conditioning. What do daily responsibilities, Travis, look like for you?
So yeah, I'm the head of strength and conditioning with the All Blacks Sevens. So it's part of the All Blacks umbrella or banner. We play a slightly different version of rugby. So traditional rugby is 15 versus 15. We're 7-on-7, and we play a tournament style format. So we have a tournament every month in a different country around the world. So we play 6 games in a weekend. So basically, each game lasts 15 minutes. We're preparing our athletes for battle 6 times. So it's very high intensity, lots of contact, lots of physical work, and on top of that, a large number of sprints and repeat efforts within the game. So you're playing 6 games in 2 days. And round robin's day 1, your quarters, semis, and finals are day 2. So it's you're in and you're out. So yeah, very physically demanding sport. But day-to-day operations, oversee all the loading patterns, planning, monitoring, and if we need to adapt and monitor from there. So I do all the strength and conditioning planning as well.
Educate us a little bit, if you will. Again, your background, you're in rugby, but you've also had much experience in hockey as well. But I've looked at your bio. The All Blacks or the All Sevens. I also see the Ferns. I know there's different layers. Sure. Is this just how many players on the field at a time? Is that, or is it the age demographic of the athletes?
It's a different version of 7. So it'd be like 3-on-3 hockey versus 5-on-5 hockey almost. The difference between the two. Jeez. So yeah, it's a different beast. Still, they originate from the same place. But yeah, my background, I'm basically a sports scientist and strength and conditioning coach by trade. I kind of blend both of them together in a sense. I guess from a point of view of an S&T coach, I always ask myself basically 2 questions. What are the demands of the sport?
Yep.
And is my programming building robust athletes to handle the demands of this sport?
Sure.
And if not, what are we doing about it?
Yeah.
And then that put on my other hat, my sports science hat, ask myself, what's the load and how are my athletes tolerating the load? So those are the basic questions I ask myself as a coach and a scientist.
I think, Trav, what you hit on is really important. As a coach and a scientist, I'm not getting too deep down the rabbit hole here, but I think you've got a unique experience in the fact that you've got both the pragmatic application and you've got the quote-unquote sports science hat. You know, not saying one without the other is a futile approach, but I certainly think it can offer a competitive advantage, specifically in speaking with the athletes, understanding the sport. One would argue, yeah, the data is important. Yeah, the measures are important, but communicating that information may be actually more important than the information itself.
Yeah, so that's kind of where my high performance framework stems from. So the first thing is care and connection, build trust with the athlete. So if you don't have that, you have nothing in terms of your sport. And gain their trust, and then trusting your program, trusting your intuition. So the old adage, but be a coach first, scientist second. That's where we connect with our athletes, get buy-in and build trust. I guess the other part is have a process as well. Obviously, as a scientist and strength fish, you need to have a process,
Yep.
but you also need to be agile and adaptable enough to alter your current process if things change, because the only constant in the world is change. So
Sure.
make sure we're adaptable enough to see that and take information on from other S&C coaches, other sports scientists, people from outside your environment to help grow your program, grow yourself, grow your athletes. So it'd be kind of my framework's built around that, always learning and adapting and growing with this
Yeah.
change because it's going to happen. It's inevitable.
100%.
Yeah,
Great points. You're in Auckland, New Zealand. So you had your master's at Edith Cowan University,
correct.
Auckland University of Technology, PhD. What led you to Auckland, and specifically what led you into rugby?
Two sports growing up. I played hockey in the winter, rugby in the summer. So I was always loved contact sport, the physical aspect of the sports, the competition, the battle. So yeah, what led me to rugby would be it was my summer sport. We had a pretty good high school program growing up, so I just got kind of forced into playing
Yeah.
it. It was either that, hockey, or
Yeah.
football. What else around that? So it led me to rugby. Kind of most led me to like sports science or human performance. They do it really well in Australia. They study
Sure.
it really well. It's very applied, so you get placed with a team. You can do all your research on team sport athletes,
Yeah.
and I found it a better avenue than staying in North America at the point. So in 2007, I went over to Perth to study sports science, sport and exercise
Yeah.
science, and they were leading the
Yeah.
way in that area.
Sure.
I felt they were far ahead of the rest of the world at that time point. So headed over there to complete my master's, and then it led me to New Zealand because of my contacts in Australia. So, like I said, care and connection. The more connections you make, the more opportunities you'll receive or have. So I got offered a PhD scholarship with New Zealand Rugby, leading into the 2011 World Cup. So I did my
Outstanding.
PhD over there. So I got dragged over there. It was a very great opportunity. So yeah, owe a lot to New Zealand Rugby in terms of my development and growth.
I had the opportunity to interview last week, actually, Franco Impellizzeri, super bright
Oh
guy,
yeah.
Franco, and he's teaching right now a master's level course, and he talked about some of the prerequisites that the coursework, and I was just amazed. Everything from the philosophy of science, everything from inductive, deductive reasoning, logical fallacies. Essentially, he was teaching thought process and then kind of layering it with the scientific principles and rationales at the master's level. Obviously, he teaches PhD students as well, but it's just an interesting. You talked about, you know, Australia leading the way in sports science. It was just an interesting to now look back, at least in North America. I'm not suggesting this is the way it always is. It's my bias, like going through a PhD in Canada, which was fantastic. Don't have anything negative to say about it at all. But I thought it was just the difference in the core curriculum, comparatively speaking, in terms of the actual coursework, was different from my experience in Canada, if that makes sense.
You find it very applied, and all the information leads you back to performing well when you
Yep.
get out of academia. So
Yep.
being ready for the real world, being ready for sport, being ready for team sport, they bridge the gap very well
Sure.
in terms of applying that sports science knowledge as well.
Sure. Who were a couple of your mentors, whether it was Edith Cowan or Auckland University of Technology, and give me maybe one or two big lessons that you took away that you carry with you today?
So there's probably three in my life.
Okay.
So my mother would be the first.
Yep.
So she was academic driven. She's a professor at Guelph University. Basically instilled a thirst for knowledge in me. So books always came first in our family. So kind of grew that from a young age, and was
Sure.
always curious, inquisitive growing up because of that, to learn more and understand more and basically
Sure.
grow my knowledge. So my mom will be the first one. In terms of my studies, there'll be two: John Cronin, Nick Gill, and Clark Laidlaw. So one is a pure sports scientist, John Cronin, Professor John Cronin at AUT.
Yeah. Yep.
He helped grow my passion for basically study and basically paved the way for me to learn and develop. So messages from him, got a couple blurbs from him as well. I'll send you through the bio later, but there's a few
Sure.
things that I learned from him. Basically, he taught me how to be a real student. He taught me how to be a PhD student in a sense. So
Yep.
how to shape my ideas, the process, critical thinking, reflecting, refining, how to be concise would be a good one.
Yep.
How to be concise and direct with the information
Yep.
on your delivery. But yeah, he was a true sports scientist. My second one will be Nick Gill. He's a practitioner. He's the head of
Yep.
the All Blacks 15s
Yep.
program. He's won 2 World Cups and written a book as well. He's a
Yep.
very smart man, very applied practitioner, great strength
Sure.
and conditioning coach. His biggest strength is connecting as well, connecting with the people,
Yep.
good energy. So in our environments, we require positive energy, optimism. That's what we look for. That's what most we look for when we hire first as well, is having that
Sure.
energy. A lot of people
Yep.
have the knowledge, but it's that positive energy, optimism, outgoing, forward thinking.
Yeah, you realize, I don't know, maybe I've aged myself a little bit now, 44 years old, 20 plus years in this. I think, you know, early on, it was all about programming, periodization, metrics, numbers. And the older I've gotten, it's so much more about communication, relationships, trust. And if you don't have that, it doesn't matter how the former is. Rather, they're useless. You can't get any buy-in, right? It's the glue. It's the glue. I'm fond of saying this. I stole it from a book. I think it's called The Talent Code, and I probably say it to our listeners quite a bit. Good coaches are like gardeners. Gardeners don't grow flowers. They create an environment for flowers to grow. And I truly believe that. It starts with communication, trust, connection, like you had mentioned. I know those are huge, huge lessons. I think at times as we age, sometimes we learn the hard way, but sometimes we get a chance to get a mentor that can teach us that through fast forward learning, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. And I guess the second one would be Clark Laidlaw. He's the head coach of the
Yep.
All Black 7. He doesn't necessarily coach. He basically creates an environment that allows the athletes to learn and problem solve on the go.
Yep.
It's the kind of
Yep.
environment he creates for them. So
Yep.
basically, yeah, he taught me how to build an athlete learning environment and training environment built on trust, respect, connection. But the biggest thing was giving ownership to the athletes.
Yep.
We have a really strong leadership group within the team. There's about 5 players in the leadership group, and they contribute to a lot of decision making with us as coaches and performance staff. So it's basically a collective team.
Sure.
Players have a lot of say and
Yep.
responsibility and ownership about how the program runs, how the team runs. Again, it even strengthens the point even more that culture and connection are key.
Yeah, exactly. I think I heard this a long time ago from a performance coach in the National Hockey League. He said coaching is a lot like parenting. At an early age, maybe a directive approach is warranted. Like young Tommy who squats like a wilted candle. You're going to tell him what to do and how to do it. And Tommy, I don't really need your input. But at an older age, it's much more of a cooperative approach. Nobody knows their body like you do and how they feel, et cetera, and what works for them, whether placebo or not. Those are all important considerations because I can tell you right now that enhances the buy-in, it enhances the communication, it enhances the belief and trust. So all good points.
Yes, I guess those would be the 4 key people in my life around my learnings and development as a person and a professional.
I want to pivot, Trav, really quick. I want to talk about the book. I want to see how, James Kerr's book, Legacy. Okay, I want to talk about culture. Now, I read this book probably, I don't know. I don't know how old the book is. I guarantee it's on my shelf. I probably read it 10 years ago, 10, 12 years ago, if it sounds that old. But it's essentially 15 all black principles. And I'd like to go over these verbally with you and then kind of, if you wouldn't mind, expanding on a couple of them that you think perhaps are the most important. I realize they're all important, but in some capacity. But sweep the sheds, go for the gap, play with purpose, pass the ball, create a learning environment. I love this one. No dickheads. Embrace expectations. Train to win. Keep a blue head. Know thyself. Invent your own language. Sacrifice. Ritualize and actualize. Be a good ancestor and write your legacy. So let me start by asking, where did these principles come from? Were they organic within the locker room? Were they from older teams? How did those principles become established?
Yeah, so obviously this is the 15s environment, but a lot of these principles come across to our program as well. So,
okay.
Yeah, a lot of it comes from the rich history in New Zealand. So All Blacks have been together since the early 1900s, right? So it's a long storied history. Basically, the dream to play for this team was growing up as a kid. So It's ingrained in their culture, ingrained in New Zealand's culture, the fabric of the whole nation. So it's, if a game comes on, the whole country stops to watch.
Yep.
So everyone is interconnected, from grassroots to moms to dads to grandmas. Everyone knows the All Blacks and when they're playing. So it goes a lot deeper than just these words. But sweep the sheds is basically taking care of today, making sure you do your part, keep your ego in check. You can be confident, but keep your ego in check. Be a good person, basically. Sweep the sheds, take care of today is a big one for me. The learning environment for us is another big one, but probably the number one is at 6. The no thick heads policy.
I love it. I love it. No tolerance for that, eh, Trav? I love it.
No time for that. So yeah, it's one of our approaches when we screen for staff, players, making sure. And New Zealand's pretty good that way in terms of being humble, being good people, honest, and it creates a stronger environment, stronger culture. That's the biggest thing. It helps make sure everything stays intact and that stays strong, and the belief within the team stays strong as well.
The other one I wanted to ask about, and I know that the ritualize and actualize, would you explain the actual ceremony that takes place before games? Is it the All Black 7s or is it the 15s where they have their ancestral dance?
Yeah, we both perform a haka. So the 15s will perform a haka before battle.
Could you explain that? Could you explain that to the listeners, Trav? What is a haka?
Yeah, the haka is like a Maori tradition where before they go to war, they used to perform a haka to try to intimidate other people on the battlefield before they went to war. So they carried through that tradition into the rugby, into the battle, into the arena. So it's basically laying down the challenge to the other team to come and compete against us. See if you can handle it. And there's a few different types of hakas. The 7s have their own haka that was written as well for the last few years to represent our team and our culture. So the 7th team perform the haka when they win.
Okay.
And we also use it in ceremonies. So if a player is moving on or a staff member is moving on, they'll perform a haka as a sign of respect to that person as well. So it has a few different meanings for the New Zealand environment as well, New Zealand people. So yeah, it's basically a war dance as well as a sign of respect at ceremony. So yeah, it can be quite intimidating.
I was going to say, I would imagine there would be times the game's lost before it's even played. If there's one that's done before the game, golly, probably intimidating.
So that's obviously connected to the Maori culture, which is ingrained deep in New Zealand. In New Zealand, there's a large Pacific Island influence as well. So our teams are made up of Pakeha, people of European descent, Maoris, Samoan, Tonga, Cook Islands, all over the Fiji as well. So teams made up of a whole bunch of different areas around the Pacific Islands. So there's a strong bond and culture within those environments. So I'll give you an example of our day, how it looks like. It looks a little bit different than a day in hockey. So everyone comes in together, say in the morning, we're all in one meeting room together. We circle up. One of the players has a guitar. We sing one of the songs in one of the nation's tongues. So it might be in Fijian, it might be in Samoan, it might be in English, but you sing one of the songs every morning. And then usually play a game, like a wake you up game for mental stimulation, and then the meeting starts. That's basically how the initial day begins. Everyone reconnects, sings, and the day starts. That's how we start every day in this environment.
That's outstanding. So is everybody, this is led by the team. So essentially a team member is playing an instrument. Is that accurate?
Yeah, one of the players is, athletes is playing the guitar, singing. It helps when they have nice voices, quite good singers within the team.
Trav, you ever get up there and start singing, or is it just for the players?
It's got to be a bit of a country western, I'm not sure. No, we all sing it together. Like, we all know all the songs.
Yeah.
Everyone knows all the songs.
This episode has been brought to you by the High Performance Hockey Masterclass. The High Performance Hockey Masterclass is a comprehensive lecture series exploring the science and practice of high performers in the sport of ice hockey. It was designed and created and engineered by myself, Anthony Donskoff. It is an 8-part lecture series that includes metric fixation, the tyranny of metrics, reading research, what matters, Going back to get my PhD as a 40-year-old, how do you target your readings in terms of digesting, accumulating, and reading your research? Biomechanical considerations for ice hockey. The adductor magnus, how we program hip health during the off-season and in-season. The Gain Go Grow model, this idea of a 3-day rollover program for high-performance hockey players. Considerations for the in-season, how to manipulate that model for high performers. Our communication structure within the confines of Donskoff strength and conditioning. And finally, the fast and frugal tree, considerations for return to play. More information on the High Performance Hockey Masterclass can be found at anthonydonskov.gumroad, GUMROAD.com. Thanks for listening. That's outstanding. Let me ask you this. You're Canadian by birth, right? So you were born in Canada.
Born in Southern Ontario, yeah.
Southern Ontario. Contrast that, if you will, like with the culture, both similarities and differences in hockey. Is it much more, I would imagine, because of the culture and the ties, it's a very different look, or is it similar?
I draw a lot of similarities growing up in terms of, think of Hockey Canada and think of the All Blacks. They're basically the pinnacles of both their sports. So as a child, we're all wanting to play for Team Canada. We're watching Mario Lemieux, Wayne Gretzky, Sidney Crosby. We all emulate them. They do the exact same thing in rugby. So as two countries, Canada and New Zealand are very similar in terms to their connection to their team.
Yep.
So Canada's connection to the national hockey team is very similar to New Zealand's connection to the All Blacks, the All Black 7.
Got it.
So yeah, lots of similarities in that sense. Similarities growing up to playing hockey, playing rugby. The grassroots is strong in both, and that's where your talent pool.
Sure.
Right. The competition is so much stronger in New Zealand because there's so many good players, and that's why they have so many elite rugby players in their dominant nation in rugby. The same goes for Canada and hockey. So there's a lot of similarities because it's a strong culture, Canada and hockey as well. So it brings the country together, it brings everyone together.
Yep.
So yeah, I see a lot of similarities from that respect as well.
Okay.
Differences would probably be that Polynesian influence. There's a lot more cultures that contribute to that as well, moving forward versus Canada. So there's a large influence of that Polynesian as well that influenced how they play the game, how they play rugby.
Sure.
So it influences the style of play. There used to be a whole lot of run it straight, run off the ball, contact from New Zealand Europeans, and then they started bringing Pacific and Island nations started coming and brought a lot more flair to the game as well. A lot more power to the game, a lot more speed to the game. So it changed everything. Changed how the game had to be played.
Yep.
So that's probably where it's ingrained in terms of how the athletes play. And that brings us to, you got a program for the individual. So we got a whole array of athletes on our team, skill types, strengths and weaknesses. And obviously we want to make those strengths as big as possible, right? So we grow those strengths. We don't necessarily try to bring up their weaknesses. They got here for a reason. We want to grow those strengths in that athlete. Is he a power athlete? Is he a speed athlete? Or is he a workhorse? We want to grow that area so he's the best in the world at that. And obviously bring those weaknesses up as well, but it's just grow the strength. That's why he's here. That's why he made the team.
Yep.
So there's a huge mix of the types of players we have within our environment.
Well, let's get right into that. I want to transition smoothly. You brought to a great point here in terms of measures of the culture and how rich of a history it is for the All Blacks. Let's talk about high performance in rugby. We're going to get to the sexy stuff, the high performance models, et cetera. But when you say we have to program for different individuals, et cetera, walk me through, are you, right now, obviously it's in season, right? It's management versus development. How many games are played in an All Blacks season? I know you said at times 6 in the course of a weekend, but how many in totality are played? What are the months from what to what?
Yeah, so our season runs from October to June.
Okay.
So obviously October is our preseason. We're building for our first 2 tournaments in the end of November. So big preseason to build up. So you got a lot of growth, a lot of physical growth in the off season. We have a lot of time to grow the athlete in the off season and build up their weaknesses, build up their strength.
Sure.
where there's no interference. You know what interference is?
Yep.
Obviously,
Yep.
the game
Yep.
takes away time from building the athlete up and developing the athlete.
Sure.
Yeah, October to June, and we have 10 tournaments within that time frame.
10 tournaments within that time
10
frame.
tournaments, 10 6-game tournaments, if you will.
So 60 some odd games, right?
60 games exactly.
So let's talk about this. You talked about in season, off season, like complement versus compete. Let's take now this large gap of time that we have to work with our athletes. Okay, walk me through that process. There's an onboarding process. You're taking baseline measures, and you're meeting with both returners and potentially rookies, right? You don't have to tell us what these are, but how do you decide what your KPIs are for rugby? Is it based on position? Is it based on where the athlete falls in the sample relative to position? How are you basing these? And then how are you starting to lay out the program for this individual athlete? Is it done in a bucket? Hey, we've got 3 programs. This is a program for speed. This is a program for someone that needs strength. This is a program for someone that needs power. How does that work? I know there's a lot to bite on in that question. I can go one by one, but does that make sense?
Makes total sense, mate. So I build the athlete from the ground up, regardless of what sport they're in. So you create a solid foundation before you put on the frame.
Yep.
So we develop the big rocks first. So the big nuts and bolts to be able to tolerate the demands of the game first. They need to be able to tolerate the demands of games to dominate the game. We gotta build that up first. So yeah, we get 18, 19-year-olds coming in as rookies, similar to the NHL.
Yep.
And we have 34 to 38-year-olds who are the veterans or the leaders of the group, if you will,
Yep.
the leaders. And they're totally different programs in terms of what they need and where they're at in their careers, if you will. So they all, basically when they first come in, we have a bunch of baseline monitoring. And the biggest question, this is for a lot of S&C coaches, they need to think when they're coming into the field, make sure you measure what matters and measure what's going to make a difference. Throw everything else out the window. So what truly matters to your environment in terms of physical metrics? And then is it going to make a difference to that athlete, to the team, to the program? Is it going to improve their performance and output in the end?
Sure.
So there's a lot of bells and whistles out there in terms of people throwing a whole bunch of different exercise and testing equipment at you. And you have to decide as an S&C coach, sports scientist, what truly matters to your team, to your program. Is it better informing your program in a sense?
Absolutely.
So I could touch on what we do in the sports science context, but it's very similar to other programs. We do cover all the bases. We look at all the injury prevention testing. So we look at calf, hamstring, neck, strength testing. Our big one is hamstring and rugby. It's like the groin for hockey. You keep a healthy hamstring, you have a healthy athlete. So we want to build robust hamstrings that are strong and can run fast or move fast. So one of my strengths is simplifying those complexities. So obviously simple when you think of it. Run fast, often, build strength. 2 protective mechanisms for the hamstring. Is an example in our environment. All athletes need to have this. There's no old, young, veteran development.
It makes sense. For hockey, I think the older I've gotten in terms of quote unquote testing, and I use those in air quotes, how much information can I get to the coach that provides really good context without crushing the athlete? Can I use it as a baseline if the athlete gets injured? And can I test it while the athlete doesn't even know it's being tested? Can it be part and parcel of our program? The other thing I think you hit on which is interesting, is we're swimming, and this is my opinion and my bias. You can agree to disagree, and that's fair. We're swimming in a sea of metrics. Like there's a metric for everything. It's crazy. And I get it. There's input, output, and outcome. And I think another question we should ask our coaching profession is, what is the outcome? Is that going to help us win games? Like, those are hard. The hardest things to measure are closest to the scoreboard.
Correct.
The hardest things to measure are closest to the scoreboard.
And if you think of your best athletes, are they necessarily always the fittest, fastest, and strongest players on your team? If no, then what are we doing?
Yep. No, it's such a great point. We own force plates. And I'm sure, obviously, there's, I think right now on the Hawkins system, there's 53 metrics. You could spend a day on a jump, like literally a day on a jump.
It's one movement pattern.
Exactly.
So yeah, I did my PhD in force velocity profiling on force plates and linear position transducers and accelerometers. So yeah, I understand.
Yep.
And that is understanding one little thing very, very well, right?
Sure.
And then once you come into the real world, you need to expand
100%
to develop these athletes. Yeah. So yes, it's a great test. It's a great tool. Force plates are an unbelievable tool for us as practitioners to have. They're wireless now. You can take them anywhere with you. You can measure whatever you want under the sun as long as you're applying force to those plates.
Sure. Talk to me a little bit about the model, the high performance model that you have for the All Blacks. Is it a typical, like the 4 coactives, technical, tactical, psychological, physical? And then what do you think? How do you iterate that model over time? Is it you meeting with a performance staff? Is it meeting with PTs, ATs? How does it work in New Zealand? Is it any different than the National Hockey League?
So it's everyone in a room together from a high-performance staff, basically, initially. So if you're starting from scratch, let's say you start from scratch, you want to create a high-performance model. Rugby's first. So how is this helping our performance on the field? That's the question the coach needs to know. That's the question we're all trying to answer, right? So how are we preparing the athletes for this? And then there's information coming from all our support staff around that, from the S&C coach. What's the strength? What's the power? What's the speed? How's his size? How's his body weight? How's his skin fold? How's his body composition? So that's all the S&C side, all the strength, power, velocity, force development side.
Yep.
And we have the nutritionist. We actually have a dietitian. How's his eating? What fuel does he need? The heavy sweater? How much fluid does he need? So there's a lot of questions that come. So we work through every pillar and then come up with a collective on how we're going to help that athlete to help the team. So it's team, athlete, and how all the different areas or pillars, if you will, are going to help that athlete and help lift that athlete up to help us win. So the goal, why are we here? We're here to win a gold medal at the Olympics. That's why I'm here. The reason I have a job. Like to say, never forget about your why. Yep. So why did they hire you? What are your strengths? What's your magic? Why are you in the environment you're in right now? So the big thing to always think of, why did the team hire you? Well, you're here to win and you're here to help. You're here to serve those athletes. So I learned that Jay Millett, the director at the PGK, they were here to lift up the athletes. So we're here to serve. So what can you do every day to help that athlete be better? It's basically what he taught me very well.
Sure.
So there's a lot of nuggets I learned when I was working with the Golden Knights from a high performance perspective.
Sure. I mean, we talked a little bit briefly about collecting baseline. We talked about this idea of metrics and at times how fixated we are with them. And no one's suggesting not to measure. We're proponents of that. We're just saying, watch what we measure, and not everything that can be counted counts, and not everything that counts can be counted. Where do heuristics or rules of thumb fit in for you? There's an individual that I've read considerably. I think is just a really brilliant thinker, Gerd Gigerenzer, and he talked about this idea of, it's easy to talk about what happened, right? We already know what happened. It's the past. The hard thing is anything in complex system. The word predict that's a dangerous word to use, right? You can't do that in clouds and clocks. One's complicated, one's complex. But you said that many times we can use just short mental rules of thumb that at times are better than overthinking complex algorithms, because the past happened and most of it, it's hard to decipher what signal and noise is, right? So do you see the heuristics, rules of thumb for sports performance or for coaching? Do you use those? Are they part and parcel of how you operate on a daily basis?
So there's something called feel. So the more experience you have in an environment or the more experience you have as a coach, you have a better feel for your athletes the longer you work with them. So we can measure everything under the sun. We can measure their wellness, how they feel, how they're tolerating load. Are they sore? Are their jumps down? Is their groin strength down? Yes, that'll give us a physical quantitative measure. But how they look and how they feel on the field is almost a stronger picture to us in terms of how they're tolerating training, if you will. Our coach is actually very good at that. So he'll come to me during training and say, "What's our load at? Is it at 800 IMETs?" I'm like, "Yeah, we're at 850." So he knows exactly where the players are at. And he'll come to me, "How's player A feeling? He looks a bit off." I'm like, "Yeah, he's got a sore calf." So our head coach is very aware. He's a really good feel for the team.
Sure.
So he knows where his athlete's at before me. He's the head coach. And that's the beauty of our environment. We basically work right beside each other. Our desks are beside each other. So I'm right beside the head coach as we work, as I do the load planning, as we plan our year. We plan it together.
Yep.
So the head coach, the manager, and myself basically sit in the room, plan the year together. And like I said, the biggest thing is only constant is change. So we have to be prepared to adapt.
Yep.
If we need to adapt. But you have a plan in place, you move forward and keep on reflecting, revising, reviewing that plan to see if it's working within your program. So I would call it feel. Once you have a really good feel for your athletes. Obviously, as you come out as a young practitioner, you don't have quite the same feel, so you measure more. More. It's like a safeguard. And I did the same. I would too, because I want to know metrics, where my athlete's at. Is he ready to go? Am I going to injure him? Is he ready to play? Yep. So yeah, that's probably, and as you evolve, you learn more of your experiences and you rely more on experience as well. Not to say that the metrics and kinematics and kinetics aren't important.
Sure. No, makes perfect sense. And one thing I failed to say regarding heuristics or feel is that it's essentially related to experience. I mean, you're not going to get the feel if you don't have the experience, right? You got to be been there, done that for years and years to build those mental shortcuts. It also helps. One thing I wanted to pick out between you said you meet with the coach. That's critical because if you don't have buy-in from key decision makers, it doesn't matter the technology again, right? It's a shiny thing on a shelf, right?
That comes back to early comms. It's all about communication. Early communication can mitigate a lot of issues later. The earlier you communicate anything with the coach, your wife, someone, the more you can save off later, right? So obviously, we meet every morning, 8:30 every morning as a coaching staff for the high performance meeting. So the 3 assistant coaches, myself, the head physio, all get in the room together every morning to discuss our players and what the day looks like. So that's where I look at good communication and working together, not in silos. That's what it looks like to me. Everyone in the same room, connecting, making sure all the athletes are accounted for, and we're going to have a good training day. Let's go.
Yep. Regarding your communication, Trav, this idea when you're communicating load, etc., to the head coaching staff or the ATs, PTs, etc., inform versus persuade. Is your goal within your meeting, hey, this is the information, obviously you're the head coach, etc., this is what you do? Or is it, hey, listen, this is my strong recommendation, take the day off based on this? Is it an inform or persuade based on your communication type? Or do you feel, hey, it's for us, it's always going to be inform?
It's circumstantial. So inform if there's no red light. There's a red flag, then me and the medical team will make a call.
Sure.
But if it's not going to affect the athlete at training, it's inform the coach where we're at and load, what we need to get done the rest of the week. And he'll make the call. He'll make the final call on if the athlete's going to play, if he's in, if he's out. There's only a couple times where we actually need to truly pull the athlete. That's if it's going to risk him for his health. If it comes down to health, his well-being is either large risk of injury, then the medical staff will pull him.
Fantastic.
So that's kind of, we work off inform until it's a red flag, if you will.
Got it. And then last question, then we'll parlay into here. I want to talk about your book that you wrote. In terms and measures of using baseline information for your return to plays, I guess there's different ways to look at this. There's decision trees. I call these fast and frugal trees. A fast and frugal tree is essentially a lookup rule and then a stopgap. So for example, does the player have passive and active range of motion? Yes. Next step. Does the player have 90% baseline strength? Next. At any time you answer no, the player is not returned to play, right? He or she is not cleared. My question is, do you use decision trees or frugal trees, or how do you decide when a player is quote unquote returned to the pitch, return to the field, return to the ice?
So yes, we do have return to play measures in place. So we
Okay.
do have hamstring strength, neck strength, shoulder strength, depending on where the injury is
Yep.
before they return to full training.
Yep.
We have a lot of modified training where if they're a bit low on some metrics, they can perform these drills, but they can't perform full contact drills. So yeah, we have a lot of steps we need before they're back to full training. They need
Yep.
to basically be able to do 80% of a tournament week before they return to full training.
Got it.
So that's how we kind of work, which is a very large load in terms
Got
of
it.
training load. So we do work off baseline metrics load
Yep.
to make sure that athlete is physically prepared to rejoin training. But we drip feed them in. We got ice, so we got called control versus chaos, right? That's called continuum. I think Matt Tabner wrote a really good article on control versus chaos and how we slowly move from controlled, closed environments for that athlete into chaos, live games.
Sure.
That's basically the model. Something you can't predict or control versus something you can control. And that's the continuum I work off. It's actually stapled on the physio's wall, actually, his continuum. So it's a very good tool. So thank him for that.
So essentially, we're eliminating constraints and making it much more reactive as opposed to, cooking the meal, for the lack of a better word, right?
And at any time point, we can pull them back or move them forward based on how they respond. So, we look at how the athlete tolerates or responds to that stimulus, and we either move forward, we stay here, or we move back a step. So,
like it.
It's very fluid, very process driven.
Yep.
But not necessarily outcome driven. So process to get to the outcome. So working through that process, not skipping any steps at the detriment of the athlete's performance. So it's making sure the athlete's fully ready for battle because it's a highly physical, demanding environment they're going to jump back into. And we need to make sure they're ready for that.
Yeah, you can't bake a cake at 700 degrees, Trav. It'll burn or taste like shit. All right. Hey, I wanted to ask you this one. This is a big one here. Becoming an athlete. You're an author.
Yes, sir.
Come on now.
Sir.
First of all, congrats for that. That's huge. So congratulations. What was the impetus for writing the book for you, Trav?
So growing up as an athlete, I was thinking, young athlete, what would have helped me make the right decisions to become an elite athlete? What could I do to help them? So it's basically, the book is written on how to help young athletes become elite athletes. Steps along the way on what they can do to help grow that process, help make them a better athlete. So that basically a storyline of there's 10 rules to becoming an athlete, if you will, and then there's 7 elements you need to think of when you want to get to that next level, if you want to build yourself into that type of an athlete. So it was to give back to those young athletes as up and coming on people that really wanted to get to that next level. Giving them a guide. It's more of a guidebook than a novel, if you will. So it's a guide for athletes to follow to become elite based on my experiences as an athlete, as a coach, as I learned. So basically sharing my knowledge with those young athletes.
Outstanding, Trav. If you don't mind sharing with us, you said there's 10 rules to becoming an athlete. Could you give us 2 or 3 that you think are really important? Not that they're any other important than the other 7 or 8, but could you give us 2 or 3 that you feel are really important for the listener?
The first one would be start now.
Yeah, great.
So the biggest one, believe it's in Barcelona way, is early ownership of your destiny is what separates elite from just good athletes. It's the biggest thing. So start now will be the first thing on my list. The other one would be consistent, be adaptable.
Yep.
Those would be top 2. Third one would be live and train with purpose, in my mind.
Got it.
So there's a list of 10 in my book as well. And then there's 7 specific elements to focus on, which are basically the physical, the mental, the technical, lifestyle, diet, nutrition, performance, and obviously character. So your character as a person, basically what values you hold, how you uphold it. Are you a role model?
That's fantastic.
What do you aspire to be?
I'll put a link up to the show notes on the book. And congratulations. That's a huge accomplishment. Trav, where can listeners find more about you?
Good question. So I spend most of my time working within this high performance environment. So yeah, I don't do very many podcasts.
Yep.
I've written a lot of research, so there's a lot of stuff on Google Scholar if everyone upskill of where I come from, what I've learned, what my academic journey is. There's a couple videos on YouTube of me as a coach, but the majority of my stuff is a lot of articles and research within Google Scholar. You can just search my name in sports science, and a lot of information will come up around where my research comes from and how I help grow the industry.
Outstanding. Trav, what's next for you?
Next for me, gold medal. Paris 2024 is my goal.
That's a
for
big
my
one.
athletes.
Educate the listeners on that, if you will. I know 2024. Tell me what that, I mean, that's a huge build up.
So it's a pinnacle for us in rugby 7. So every 4 years, obviously, Olympics comes around, and our goal is obviously win a gold medal at the Olympics. We had silver last Olympics, lost to Fiji in the final. We had a World Cup in August, lost to Fiji in the final. So our goal is to win the Olympics and beat Fiji, obviously. But we need the biggest thing is don't focus on the other team with us, focus on ourselves and what we can do, what we can control to build these athletes up to win these games. So, yeah, we're currently in a heat block cycle, so we're doing everything we can to prepare. We got Hong Kong coming up in 2 weeks. It's going to be, 30 degrees, 85% humidity. So that's Celsius. Then if you convert to Fahrenheit for me, but yeah, that's Celsius. It's going to be really hot. I put the boys in the heat chamber the last 2 weeks at the same temperature. We've been smashing out watt bikes and circuits, and little snippet is doing cognitive tasks under fatigue to test their minds. So they do 30 minutes hard out on a watt bike, and we have a bunch of tasks they have to solve and problem solve under fatigue. That's to help them with their decision making on the pitch when they're under fatigue, or on the field under fatigue. So that's the block we're in right now, heat block, getting ready for that to close out this World Series. So we're in first right now by 12 points. You basically get 22 points every tournament you win. So we need to win one of the next 2, and we can hopefully close out and win the World Series this year.
That's outstanding. Our guest today has been Dr. Travis McMaster. Trav, thanks so much for joining us.
Appreciate it, mate. Take care.